Thanks a million for doing this, guys. It's brilliant. It's brilliant to get it up and running. Our second in our In the Spotlight series, so it is as such. And just to highlight our projects from iNote and HighRed for All. So Ellen and Shelley have been working on both projects, and then Shelley moved off the project, but still has been working in the area of accessibility, obviously from her other role. Then, so I'm just going to hand it over to yourselves, guys, and leave you to it, and we'll be listening at it in the background. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Louise. Well, hi to everybody. My name is Shelley Brady, and currently I'm working as the Disability Officer here in IT Sligo. The main part of my role now is supporting students who have disabilities through the Disability Support Service, but I was lucky enough to work with Ellen and Louise on the iKnow project last year, where I was involved in looking at equity of access and student supports, which is very much centred around planning from the very start for flexibility, universal design, so designing for everybody, not just the few. And I suppose a common misconception is that accessibility is all about disability, where it's really about universal design, which benefits everybody. So that can include people with disabilities, but it's for everybody. So when we are working with our students, we want our content to be consumed by as many people as possible. So as I mentioned, I'm working at the moment in the Disability Office, so I can put this need into a little bit of perspective with the numbers of students working with a disability in IT Sligo. So at the moment, we've about 5% of our student body currently just registered with a disability. So that's just those students who are registered and have a formal diagnosis or have chosen to disclose. So in reality, this number is a lot higher and it's growing year on year. In fact, through our DARE intake this year, which is a CAO entrance for the disability access route to education, that increased by 80% this year, which is absolutely fantastic. And although disability is the focus of my work, it's really clear through interactions and conversations that accessibility impacts positively on all of our students. So when we look at this list of features, they're the norm now. So ramps, automatic doors, sign language, interpreters, etc. And they're legal requirements for the most part, but this wasn't always the case. We can all agree, though, that they should be standard. None of us would argue against this. But for the majority of us, ensuring that these are in place isn't our responsibility. We want to see them in society, in our communities, we would advocate for them, but it's not usually our responsibility. But now when it comes to accessible learning materials, it is becoming all of our responsibility. There are now legal obligations around this. Making accessible material, it's very doable, and Ellen's going to be demonstrating some of the tools for you around this in just a minute. But when we talk about accessibility, what do we mean? Well, we just mean that the content is designed and developed so that everybody can perceive, understand, navigate, interact with it, and contribute to the content. And sometimes it's useful to think about our content in terms of usability obstacles or some of the obstacles people might face when they're trying to access content. So by improving the accessibility of content, it's all about reducing those basic barriers to comprehension. So to take an example, to properly access content online, people with visual disabilities may require a screen reader or magnification software, and they may be more likely to rely more heavily on a keyboard than a mouse. So there's really simple ways to design content to meet the requirements of these tools to help these people or access our content. Another example would be if you're watching a video in a loud environment, or if you can't hear the audio because you have a hearing impairment, by just including transcripts or closed captions, it provides a better experience for the student. So if our contents and programs are accessible, more students than ever will be able to consume the information in a way that best suits them. Accessibility in the world of the big software companies is no longer an afterthought. So when companies like Microsoft and Google are designing new features and new apps, it's no longer about retrofitting, but the products are designed to be accessible and inclusive from the start. All of our students now have access to assistive technology. We have our Assistive Technology Officer, Fiona Fox, and she supports our students within the Disability and Learning Support offices. So she'd provide high-tech or specialised AT, but she also provides support and training in tools such as Microsoft 365, which have fantastic AT available to all of our students. So it's not something that the minority use anymore, but the majority of our students do. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Ellen to show us what we can do as individuals today to collectively change a student's educational experience. It's all about future-proofing our content. So that's as much as is possible. It's impossible to do it perfectly, but as much as it is possible. So it's easier for our students to consume, for every student who may be interacting with it. It's an ever-evolving space. We're all constantly being educated. It is a journey. So just to say, if any of it feels overwhelming or people aren't sure where to start, that's okay, because the good news is that we're here to help you. So just please do get in touch if that is the case. So thank you, and over to you, Ellen.
Thanks, Shelley. Okay, so the specific role of IT Sligo within iKnote is the development of online learning student support services model. So accessibility is obviously crucial in terms of student support, and I think Shelley's put it into really good context there. But as some of you might know as well, we have new legal obligations in relation to accessibility, but more than that, it's integral and part of universal design for learning and vital in terms of equity of access and an improved student experience. And I think that's something that we can all agree on and we all aspire to achieve. But it can be challenging, when we're under a lot of pressure time-wise, and kind of doing a complete accessibility audit of your content can be quite daunting prospect, and it can be difficult to know where to start. And even if you have had the training, just like applying that knowledge on a day-to-day basis can be difficult. So that kind of specific, practical, and kind of just-in-time advice is really invaluable. And then there will always be students who will require alternative formats, and while typically you'd need to make a specific request to the Access Office, that obviously involves a little bit of a delay in the student accessing the content they need. So one way we've kind of sought to address this is through the introduction of Ally. So Ally is one way we sought to address that. So it's a content accessibility service that integrates with Moodle, and it can help improve the overall student experience in several ways. I'll take you through now in a second. And it's a user-friendly system that kind of staff can choose to engage with to the extent that they're comfortable. Using Ally doesn't present any disruption or barrier to making content available to students. You just kind of upload content onto Moodle in the same way you always have done. And it goes through a kind of accessibility checklist, which is based on the World Content Accessibility Standards. And that just performs a sort of a structural and a visual analysis on the document. And then based on that process, a series of alternative formats are automatically generated for students, and feedback is provided to the instructor on the accessibility of the content they've just uploaded. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like now. You mind pushing that on, Shelley? So when you go in as a student, students will see the document uploaded by the lecturer, but now they also see this little kind of A icon with a down arrow. And when they click on that, they'll be presented with this list of alternative formats, and they can kind of choose to interact with the document in a way that suits them. So they might choose like an audio format so they can like listen to the content while they're doing housework or commuting, or obviously if they have a visual impairment, that might be useful, or might just be like more suited to their learning preference. So it's kind of looking at it in terms of like a spectrum, as well as like accessibility, and kind of talking about access from a kind of a universal design point of view. There's also the HTML version. So this basically makes it responsive to a mobile device. So if I'm looking at my learning content on my phone, like a lot of students do, if you have a Word document, I think probably a lot of people have experienced this, it doesn't fit to the screen, and then you kind of have to scroll over to the right and back over to the left to be able to read it. And it just can be really frustrating. So it just gets rid of that. Then the EPUB version is also responsive, but it's also customizable. So you can put it into something like iBooks or another e-reader, and you can change the background color, you can change the text color, text size, and you also have a local copy on your device then. Electronic Braille is basically an alternative to standard Braille. You download a BRF file onto your device, and it's compatible with a electronic Braille display. So whereas traditional Braille would be quite large and like difficult to transport, with this students can kind of on the fly download it and have it straight away. So that's obviously a huge improvement, and it probably would be like a minority of students that use that, but the impact on that small group is potentially really significant. There's also tagged PDFs. So like if Ally identifies headings or other structural elements in a PDF that are absent, it can apply that structure. So that means that the tags will be called out by a screen reader as it goes through the document, and it's also kind of easier to navigate. And then we also have the Beeline reader. So this is designed for on-screen reading. And what it does, it kind of applies like a subtle gradient to the text rather than a flat color. So it's designed to make it easier to focus when reading on the screen and kind of mitigate tired eyes, and to be useful for print disabilities like dyslexia. Okay. So when logged in as a lecturer, you'll also see that little A icon and have access to the alternative formats. But you'll also have like a little dial, and this is your feedback icon. So it's just important to note this is never visible to students, and it only refers to the accessibility of the document. So it's not giving any kind of feedback on the material or the content. So when you click on the dial icon, I'm just going to move it on there again. You will get your feedback. So it's kind of like a traffic light system. So red is significant issues, green would indicate no issues, and then amber would be some issues. And underneath that, it will show you the problems that it's detected when it went through the World Content Accessibility checks in the background. So when these come up, you mightn't necessarily be familiar with the problem or why it is a problem. So if that is the case, you can click on the button underneath that says what this means. And that will kind of tell you what the issue is, why it's a problem, and put it into a bit of context of like, why you should be doing it. So it just kind of makes it a bit more real, I suppose. And then when you've gone through that, you can go through how to add description. So that will refer to whatever the problem is. In this case, it's that the image is missing alternative text. But whatever the issue is, it will give you instructions. I'm just going to push that on again of how to rectify the problem. So it will go through how to add the image description or how to fix the problem. And once you've kind of gone through that, it will also it's quite good in that it tells you the difference between a good and a bad description, so how to do it effectively as well. And once you've done that, you can, I'm just going to push it on again, you can drag the updated version into this drag and drop box here. And that will replace the issue, or will replace the version that you uploaded previously with the issues, and you should see that the score improve once you've once you've addressed the problems that were outlined. So I'm just going to put it on again there, Shelley. And so you also, in your course administration, under reports, have an accessibility report that's generated by Ally. And this kind of gives you an insight into the accessibility of your module as a whole. So all the different elements, any issues that are arising, and how to, you can click on then to begin fixing them. So it kind of gives you an overall snapshot of where problems are occurring. So those are the main features of Ally. You just mind flicking it on there again? So it's been pretty popular with students since we introduced it in 2020. There's been over 23,000 downloads of the alternative formats, and we're in the middle of a review at the minute. But you can kind of see here that the most popular downloads are tagged PDFs and HTML. So that would just kind of indicate to me that there's probably a demand for learning material that is responsive to a mobile device, that is structured and searchable. So it's kind of that alignment between usability and accessibility. And I think what Shelley kind of mentioned earlier of about accessible design basically being good design. So I'm just going to, if you can push that on again. So by working with staff and students on Ally and UDL principals in general as part of iKnow, we've kind of been able to get a better sense of where issues are occurring and what the kind of the problems that come up again and again are. So when we brought in Ally, we set up a tile on the Moodle call page and Kelp page, and as well on the student support pages. Just kind of giving guidance on the service, what it is, how it can be a benefit, how to use it. But since that we've been using it, we've kind of expanded this to ally and accessibility, and we've been able to develop support material to address issues that kind of come up repeatedly. So I'm just going to go on to the next slide. So things like kind of adding captions to recorded and live lectures with Panopto and Teams, creating transcripts automatically with Word, adding alternative text to images, tagging PDFs, and ensuring appropriate contrast for people with visual impairments in documents. So we have kind of tutorials and guidance around all these things now. And they also have recordings of a really informative talk Shelley organised with Stephen Howell from Microsoft on tools for students, and one for lecturers on creating accessible content, and also guidance around using embedded accessibility checkers in programs like Word, PowerPoint, and Adobe Acrobat, because a lot of these programs do have embedded accessibility checkers, and while Ally is a great tool, it's obviously a lot more convenient if you can address these issues while you're creating the material and not have to go back to it. So it's kind of a way to future-proof your content, and ultimately make it more, kind of make it work harder for you in the long run and more usable for you as well. As you know, you can't predict if you're going to have a student in the future with a disability or a learning issue, or whether you potentially have a student with an undiagnosed learning issue currently. So while it can be challenging to start with, there are a lot of tools available to help you to achieve that. And all these problems are actually quite easily avoided once you have an understanding of them and know where the supports are, and an awareness of the steps involved, and it kind of just becomes habit. And just again, that idea that accessible design is ultimately good design. So that kind of concludes the presentation, I think.
Thanks a million, guys.
Okay.